Bonjour tout le monde. A couple of weeks ago, just before the release of Pokémon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, I was asked to make a tier list of my favorite Ice-type Pokémon, because I'd mentioned that they were my favorite type. And one of the responses that I got to that video was to do a similar project for Ghost types, because they're another one of my favorites, but they're one that it seems like it takes people by surprise when I say that Ghost types are among my favorites. I've gotten that reaction both for people who know me personally and from people who know me through my online handle, and I always find that a little funny because it's so obvious to me why I would enjoy ghost types. I'm a Neuralinean, I'm pretty morbid and dark by nature, and I'm actually not all that interested in the paranormal or the spiritual, so I kind of view this sort of cartoony assortment that Pokemon has as just kind of quirkily mundane, if that's the best way to describe it. So anyway, I decided to put together another video like this where I just kind of tier them according to personal preference, same as last time. This time, though, there's only 5 tiers. In the Ice tier list, there were 6, but I don't really think there's enough differentiation on my feelings. Ghost is not my absolute favorite type, so my opinions on most of these are not as strong. But, so yes, we'll be going in national dex order, except for the regional forms, which I've grouped by the generation that they came out in. Starting with Gengar. My feelings on Gengar are very similar to my feelings on Charizard, in that I'm pretty indifferent to it on its own, but it's been so overused and overplayed in the main games that I'm kind of soured on it. And it doesn't help, too, that Gengar is, for one thing, a trait evolution, something that I have never liked in Pokemon, and 2, is actually weak to the thing it's supposed to beat in Gen 1, because Gen 1 is broken. I mean, Psychics dominate, and Gengar is a poison type. That's kind of obnoxious, and like I said, Gengar has gotten way too much love. I get that it's the first Ghost and it's from Gen 1 and all that, but it's got a Mega Evolution, it's got a Gigantamax form. It's just it got a pretty big competitive nerf, losing Levitate, I believe. I don't really follow the competitive scene, but I'm at least a little aware of it. So there's that. I can only put it in B tier because I acknowledge how important it is for ghost types going forward, but I'm just also really tired of it. Skipping past Gen 2, because Mischievous got an evolution later on, we have Shidinja. I am not very fond of bug types, just because I don't really like real-life insects, but I do think Shidinja is very creative. I mean, it is a gimmick Pokemon, and gimmick Pokemon tend to be a little silly by design, actually. But I will give Shidinja credit for its whole Wonder Guard 1 HP thing. Like, that's creative and potentially game-winning if you just happen to luck into just the right situation. So, you know what? It's going in A tier, points for creativity. Sableye. I barely noticed Sableye until it got a Mega Evolution, just because of the giant gemstone that it gets to hold, and also Prankster, which is a fun ability. I'm putting it in B tier. I know it was the original, has no weaknesses, although that's no longer true because of fairy types, but it's a purple specter thing like Gengar is, so it feels a little repetitive. I can't give it too many points for being creative. Banette, or Banette, the Possessed Doll. There we go. This is one that I think when people talk about how good / bad Mega Evolutions are compared to other generational gimmicks like Z-moves and such, Banette is one that comes up fairly frequently, because if you compare it to its counterpart Dusclops got a proper evolution that I'm going to be talking about a little bit later on, but Banette only got a Mega Evolution that, while interesting, probably isn't coming back anytime soon, because it doesn't seem like Megas are, and so it's just been kind of left by the wayside. I don't think I can really put it higher than... I like the Possessed Doll idea. It's creepy in a fun way, if that makes sense. It's just been kind of left behind by time, I feel, so C rank is more appropriate for it. Driftblim. This thing is so cutely stupid. Having played Brilliant Diamond now, I have come to hate the fact that it's available only on Fridays, but I did in fact get a Drifloon. And I appreciate that the Ghost Gym leader Fontina modeled her dress after this thing with the yellow X on it and all, and it's a ghost blimp that's so cute and dumb, and I kind of like it. I kind of love it a little bit, so it's going in A rank. As is Miss Magius. If Mischievous had been left on its own and not gotten an evolution or anything else, it would go fairly low, probably around C tier, but it is going in A, like I said, just because I do think it's a lot better and more interesting aesthetically. The Mischievous line was the one regret I had in picking Diamond over Pearl, because it's exclusive to Pearl, so I had to trade for that. Now, speaking of another Sinnomon, Spiritomb. I don't care about its lore or its interesting type or anything else like that. Spiritomb is going in the bottom tier just because of how damn hard it is to catch in any game. Like, they made it nominally easier in the remakes, but it's still ridiculous, and I still have not gotten one, and I'm sorry. If you make something that unfriendly to players, I'm just not going to like it, no matter what other qualities it may have. And you will see that topic come up later in this video, too. Dusknoir. That does not flow at all, that name. Like, you have the hard K, and then you have a French word, and it just doesn't work. I can barely pronounce it. But I don't really care for this one. I like Duskull. I think it's kind of cute and macabre, and also that it only has like one eye that shifts between the two eye sockets of a skull. I thought that was clever, but then the line gets progressively less interesting as it gets bulkier and slower, and just I'm putting it in the same tier as Banette, with the understanding that even though it does have a stronger evolution, I don't necessarily like it anymore for that. Frostless. Frostless went an A tier on my ice list. It's going in A tier on the ghost list as well. I do enjoy that combination. Like I said back then, I don't really know much about the lore around it. I know it's one of several Pokemon based on a Japanese spirit. But I think it looks nice. It's shown up in some interesting battles in game. It's fairly good and competitive from what I hear. And it's a combination of two of my favorite types, so what's not to love? Rotom. Rotom, on its own, if it were not like also a character, I'd probably put Rotom in B, because the whole possessing electronics thing is at least kind of clever. I do think later Pokemon that will come along and do the whole possessed object thing better than Rotom did, although I don't know if you can really give Ghost Rotom credit for that, because its forms are no longer Ghost type. But as a little helper guide character, I'm thinking of like in Sun and Moon, it's needlessly annoying, and that kind of lowers my goodwill toward it even further, so I think C is more appropriate here. Giratina. I did play Platinum once, so I did get to see the Distortion world and all of its weird splendor. I'm not really sure what to make of it. I'm not someone who really attaches on hard to a lot of legendaries, and Giratina seems like this weird bat, centipede, dragon thing that's interdimensional. I will give it B. I do wish it had gotten a bit more time in the Sinnoh remakes, but then, they weren't really angling for Platinum content, and I know that's very controversial. I'm not going to touch that. Instead, I'm going to move on to Gen 5. Coloregregus. This one's C, because it's just not very clever. I think the lore behind it with the whole mask thing that comes with Yamask is more interesting than what it ends up as, where it's just a sarcophagus with these black hands reaching out of it. So yeah, that's a C tier for me, as opposed to Jellicent is B. It's cute, it's dumb. I like that it has a very strong gender differentiation because a lot of Pokemon don't have that. The ghost jellyfish thing is fairly interesting and adds some diversity to the ranks of commonly seen water types in games, since they can get a little samey here and there. So I did like seeing something different in that sense. Chandelure is going to be my first S. It's kind of hard to explain why I like Chandelure as much as I do. I did say when I was talking about Rotom that there are others that did the possessed object idea better, and I like the whole ghost candle lamp chandelier thing a lot. Ghost fire is a very interesting type, and it really gets me into fire types, which I'm usually not as much into them. And another reason, and this is going to be like an obscure cultural thing, is that Chandelure sounds and looks very similar to Chandelure, which is just EUR instead of URE. And Chandelure is also the feast of the presentation. It's February 2nd. It's a Catholic liturgical feast, but it's also like a French cultural tradition that is a little bit recognized in Louisiana. The tradition is to make crepes for it, and so that it gives me a nice positive association, even though they probably were not thinking of that. They were just thinking a chandelier that lures people to death or something like that. So that's probably just a coincidence, but all the same, I like it. I like Chandelure and Chandelure. And I'm going to move on now. Golurk. B for Golurk. I don't have a lot of strong feelings on it. It was the first ground ghost. That's not the most interesting thing ever, and it's a robot, which I'm not terribly interested in robots, so that doesn't say much of anything one way or the other. So there it is, but I will say that overall, as you can tell, I did like Gen 5's take on ghost types. They got a fair number of them. It's just that 2 of them were more average than the others. Aegislash, another S tier for me. This is not because Aegislash is or was, I'm not really up on competitive meta, incredibly broken with its stance shifting mechanic, although I do find that very interesting. It's just, it's a clever possessed object concept, I think, and I do find it hilarious that we have a Sword and Shield Pokemon 2 generations before Pokemon Sword and Shield. It's just kind of silly how things like that work out. But it's definitely one that I enjoy using, and so it's also, if you were not here for the Ice tier list, I really like Kalos and Gen 6, so that may be a little bit of Kalos bias in there too. Although not terribly much, because I am going to put both Trevenant and Gourgeist down in B. Grass Ghost was an interesting type combination when it came out, but now I feel like it's a little overplayed, and I generally prefer the Gen 7 takes on that type combination. Gourgeist, it's like it has the 4 different sizes, but it just seems like a needless addition to needing to catch all of them if you're a completionist, and I tend to ignore stuff like that. Otherwise, I get hung up on stuff like Spinda and all the the dots that it can have in its ears, so I just tend to ignore that. But the combination of that with the 2 of them being, I think, version exclusives in most cases, and also being trait evolutions, yeah, I can't say I have much love for either of them. But moving on to something I have even less love for, an event Mythic Hoopa. Going down in D, basically for the same reason as Spiritomb. I don't care how interesting you are if I can't get you. And it's a shame, because Hoopa seems like it could be a clever concept. I know it has its Unbound form as well. But again, event Mythic, what can I do with it? It might as well not exist. It exists to frustrate completionists like me, basically. Okay, going on a bit of a more positive note, let's go to Gen 7. And Alolan Marowak is definitely going in A. The Cubone line getting an Alolan or a regional form, I think Ghost was a shoo-in for that, given its connection to Ghost in Gen 1. The Fire typing was a bit more of a surprise, but I do think it's a really fun and interesting look, and I do remember the trial using Alolan Marowak in Sun and Moon, and that was just kind of a funny little, I think it was like a counting minigame or something like that. It's been years since I played it, and then there's one screen where just a random hiker will show up with the Marowak. That's mostly what I think of with that Pokemon. And you know what? If a Pokemon makes me laugh a little, that it gets extra points. So A tier. Decidueye. Talking about grass ghost types. To be honest, I've never used it for a full run of the Alola games, but I do think it's a clever concept based on an extinct owl, and to have a ghost starter. I never used it all the way, and from what I've read, it's pretty awful. But then most grass starters are awful in game. I mean, I did a whole Meganium run where I showed how terrible they can be. But I would be, if I ever were to do another run of one of the Alola games, I would like to try out Rowlet, just to see. Like, my favorite Gen 7 starter is the Poplio line, because I also like fairies. But again, Decidueye catches my eye in terms of interesting concepts. Oricorio, its ghost form. I don't remember exactly. I think it's called the Sensu form or something. It's based on a Japanese dance style. Oricorio is... I like that it's based on different dance styles. I used to, when I was very young, I was a dancer myself. Ballet and step. I was very, very young. But I do respect a lot of different dance forms, and so I like the idea of a Pokemon that is themed around different styles of dance. My favorite Oricorio is actually the fire form, I believe it's called the baile form. I don't speak Spanish, I'm sorry. Baile, there we go. They pronounce the L and the A. Okay, anyway, sorry. Just because that's culturally a bit closer to something that I would understand as a Latin, but I do like the ghost form as well. Probably more so than either the electric or the psychic forms. I'm less interested in either of those. Palisand. It's cute. It's a little scary in the vein of most ghost types that are cute. I'm not ordering these within the tier, but I would put this above Golurk just for being a more interesting concept, especially with its ability, which I believe interacts with it if it's hit with a water type or something like that, water move or something like that. I would put it above Golurk if I were ordering the tiers, but I'm not, and I don't think Palisand is good enough to be an A tier. So, there it is. Mimikyu. My hot take that probably isn't much of a hot take, I don't really care much about Pikachu or any of its many, many clones. But this one, it's endearing in a sad sort of way, and I do remember the totem battle where you fight it in an abandoned mall or supermarket or something like that, which is a fair bit of flavor and something I wasn't really expecting. So I'm gonna put this one also in B. I know B tier is getting full, but I think it warrants it there. Delmise. This one's going in A. It's my favorite grass ghost, although weirdly enough, it's because it has its ability essentially gives it a third stab option in steel, and I just think that's really interesting, and something that I feel like more abilities and moves should play around with typings and stab and all that, but not a lot of them do. Like I really like the move Freeze Dry as an ice move that's super effective against water, stuff like that. But just it's haunted algae that's on an anchor. Like that is such a weird combination of ideas, but somehow I think it works, and it is my favorite grass ghost. Um, Lunala and Necrosma, one of Necrosma's forms. I didn't play Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, so I can't comment too much on this. I feel like I'm gonna put these two together to reflect that. They're going in B. I enjoy them aesthetically, especially Lunala's base form. I think Psychic Ghost is a nice typing. It's another combination of some of my favorites. I like the lunar aesthetic, and it's just interesting, and it's a great box legendary. I think it's one of the more when I was going for Sun and Moon to get it years ago, I wanted Moon mostly because of Lunala, but I ended up having to get Sun because it's all that was available at the time. I don't regret it because that Sun has the Alolan Vulpix and Ninetales, which are S tier ice types in my opinion. But I've always been curious to actually try out Lunala because I missed out on that opportunity. Marshadow, easy D tier because it's another event mythic. I've heard this thing is utterly broken or was utterly broken in Ubers or whatever the highest tier of competitive play is, and it's not terribly interesting to look at. I mean, I get that fighting ghost is a unique type, but just nothing about the design screams fighting to me. I believe this is Blacephalon, is how you pronounce that. I did not play Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, and the Ultra Beast as a set have never really grabbed me. I think they're a little too eldritch for my liking, but you know what? I like Fire Ghost as a combination, and this design is just so utterly demented, this sort of disco ball head clown thing. It's going in B tier. And finally, Gen 8. And here's where I get to reveal something a little bit spoilery or something that I haven't mentioned anywhere yet. I had said back when I made the Ice tier that I hadn't yet played Sword and Shield, but someone was nice enough to get me Shield as an early Noel present, and so I've been working my way through that. That way I can actually, comment on some of these Pokemon directly, even if I haven't gotten to experience most of them. So that's a little bit better than a couple of weeks ago. Polti Geist. This is another B tier. It's mainly like if it didn't have the authentic pot versus like the cracked phony pot. I don't quite remember, but there's basically two very slight variations on it. And while I said with Gourgeist that I didn't like that because it wasn't very interesting, in this case I do think it's kind of clever, just based on like this very authentication of pottery and things like that. And it's a very small difference and doesn't affect anything mechanically, but I just thought it was a good bit of added flavor. Corsola. I have not seen much of this, and it doesn't strike me as terribly interesting. Corsola was not a Pokemon that I ever found fascinating. I guess Ghost Coral is a thing, and that's what it plays off of, but it's just kind of there for me. I remember seeing it in the Ghost Gym Leader battle, but that's about it. Runarigus, I believe this is what it's called. I prefer this to Cofagrigus, honestly. I think its evolution method is frustrating but memorable. Ground Ghost is, again, an interesting type, even though this is the third one now. And I just think it has a more interesting design than Cofagrigus. So it's going a tier above that one, up in B. Dragopold. I often forget that this one is a ghost type, or at least I did for quite a while in the years that since Sword and Shield have come out and I was not playing them, because it just doesn't strike me as a ghost on first glance, but eventually it did kind of click for me. I do. It's definitely strong enough to warrant a high tier placement, and I do think it's clever. The more I, more I consider it, so it is going an A for me. And finally, Spectrier and Calyrex Ghost Rider. I have not yet done much with the Crown Tundra, so I'm going to go ahead and put these in the same tier as what I did for Glostrier in the Ice List, in B tier. As in, I would be interested in using them, but I'm not currently sure if I like them or if I'm in love with them like this, like I am for the S tiers. So that's going to do it. I realize this was a very off-the-cuff idea, but I hope this satisfied that person who wanted to hear me talk more about ghost types. And so, what do you guys think? If you like ghost types, or, what order would you... Who are your favorites and who are your least favorites? Do you hate event mythics and trait evolutions and other frustrating things like that as much as I do? Or do you not hold that against the Pokemon who are obtainable by those methods? And if so, just general comments. I would love to hear them as always, and like and subscribe and all that good stuff. If you're not subscribed already, I like getting a feel for what kinds of things my subscribers are into, so your engagement helps me with that. I do tend to bounce around between pieces of media, games at the moment, but that's just kind of how my channel is at the moment. But with that, I guess I will talk to you guys later. Au revoir.